Each year, ORBiT conducts a survey of its stakeholders as part of the process of setting priorities for the coming year. This morning, ORBiT President Wendy Watson will share with us some of the highlights of this year's survey and the resulting ORBiT priorities for 2014. Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning.
Now, one of ORBiT's most important outputs is the creation of best practice workflows for real-time transactions. These workflows are created by teams of volunteers that we call working groups. One of the key uses of the annual priority survey is to determine the working groups that ORBiT will operate during the year. Today, we also have with us Beth Sigurdsson, team leader of the Electronic Document Transfer Working Group. Beth is going to tell us about the experience of being part of the Electronic Document Transfer Working Group. So good morning, Beth.
Good morning.
Now, before I turn things over to Wendy, I'd like to address a few housekeeping items. Our webinar today will be 30 minutes long, and we'll do our best to stick to that time limit. All of our attendees except the speakers are in listen-only mode. This is to ensure that we're able to provide you with good sound quality. However, after the two presentations, there'll be time for questions. You can submit your questions at any time using the chat box in the control panel on the right side of your screen. You'll see the chat box at the bottom of the control panel. You can enter your question in the box where it says type message here, and right below that you'll see a drop-down menu. Select the Send Question to Staff option and press Send, and we'll get through as many questions as time allows. We'll also be recording this session, and the recording will be available on the ORBiT website by tomorrow morning. So now I'd like to turn things over to ORBiT President Wendy Watson.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. There we go. In the past, we have polled the attendees at our annual face-to-face meeting. Then we broke off into the newly created working groups and got right down to the business of setting goals for the next year. This worked for us for the first few years, and then, like anything else, the process needed a shake-up. So this year we decided it was important to reach out to all of our members to ask them what they felt was important for ORBiT to focus on. Our discussion then led us to send an invitation to everyone on our mailing list, members and non-members, for their input. A broader perspective adds more value, we think, to the industry as a whole and ensures we set up working groups that will impact our industry. We think it will also attract new members to actually get the work done, and it will focus us on what the majority feels is important. The survey was pretty short, only 13 questions. We wanted to know, first of all, who was giving us their opinion. Were you a broker, a carrier, a vendor, or someone who works in the industry but more on the periphery? IBAO, CSIO, one of the magazines that are friends of ORBiT. This was important to us because ORBiT core values say that each best practice workflow must start and end in the broker management system, which means we need to hear broker voices in this survey. ORBiT is a volunteer organization. This means that everyone who chooses to sit on a working group and contribute to a working group is fitting that time into an already full work schedule. And trust me, please, we truly are aware of this. It means that we need to make sure that we're allocating resources where our members and our industry will gain the biggest benefit. I like to think about this as, where we can get the biggest bang for the buck. We discussed that perhaps there are too many working groups, and that means that we're spreading our valuable resources too thinly. With this in mind, we identified the working groups we felt were important enough for our membership to consider allowing us to continue to finish their mandate. It meant that we needed to know which of those the respondents felt were most important, and we have that answer that we're going to share with you. Our steering committee also recognized that the working groups currently in existence are dealing with what we call table stakes, things that we just simply have to compete today in our industry. None of our current working groups, with the exception of the Digital Client Experience Working Group, are looking to where we need to go for the future. As a result, we created what we call an Innovation Working Group. The members of this group are charged with looking off into the great blue yonder to see what are the trends, what are the futurists thinking about, and also are the best practice workflows that we're publishing and developing considering where they could go in the future. This group identified some trends that are in the near future that need research. So we ask you to prioritize these trends so this group could have some direction as to where to focus their finite energies. And lastly, we are getting surveyed frequently. They come to our inbox every day. So we asked if you felt we should continue to use this medium to get information from you. We left the survey open for 60 days, which is longer than we would normally allow. And we had 103 respondents, which we think is a pretty good number. So let's delve into the very high-level results of what we learned. The really good news is that 82% of the respondents were ORBiT members. We're kind of happy with this number because we believe in our heart of hearts that ORBiT members have a higher level of understanding of the matters facing our industry and the efficiency issues facing our industry. 71% of the respondents were brokers, and that is who we truly wanted to hear from. 18% were carriers and vendors, and since these two groups are stakeholders in our industry and are very much a part of driving real time, we absolutely needed to hear from them as well. When we look at provincial representation, it is not surprising that the majority of respondents were from Ontario, because as an organization, we, ORBiT, have not yet made our concerted effort to expand beyond the borders of Ontario. These results tell us that some of our membership operates in other provinces. So in essence, we are getting somewhat of a Canada-wide perspective in this survey, which we believe is positive. This question was to help us gauge which of our current working groups should continue and which of those we already identified as potential new working groups resonate with the respondents to the survey. The most support, as you'll see here, rated 4.1, came for the Digital Client Experience Working Group. No surprise when we think about what the directs are doing with driving traffic to their websites today and telling customers what services they can perform on the directs websites with the simple click of a button. This working group existed in 2014, but it did not have enough hands and simply needs more hands to handle all the work involved in hammering out the best practices. This is a big, big topic. Carriers who provide the back-end data for these activities are really important to sit on this working group, so we've got to get those added as well. Second was electronic signatures, which from ORBIT's point of view includes a voice signature, so audio signature, and a digitized or digital signature. Came second, rated 3.1. This, brokers believe and know, is really important to reducing the back and forth between prospects and clients and their broker. So this will be a new working group, which means we need brokers from all BMSs, we need carriers, and we need vendor representation on it. Tied for third is the bane of real-time, password management, and a new entrant into our broker world, telematics. I'm kind of surprised at this one, but it's interesting that they absolutely were dead on. Password management has been around since the inception of ORBiT, but not as yet defined a best practice workflow. This has got to happen in 2014. When we think about what just happened at the Canada Revenue Agency, who thought that they had themselves locked down, we've got to get it defined, because we've got to get the stickies off brokers' monitors, and we've got to get our data as safe as it can be. Again, we need more brokers on this working group. It's been hard to attract brokers because we seem to think that it's a very scary topic, a very technical topic, and it really isn't. When we have brokers on a password management working group, we just need to know, what needs to happen, when should it happen, not the hows. The hows are once the BPW is done and it goes to the techies at carriers and vendors. So brokers, we need you to think about being on this one. ORBiT is about best practice workflows. We want to define how processes should work from our desktop so that we don't have a different workflow for each carrier. So telematics is going to be a really, really important working group. We know that IBRI has plans to launch telematics for under and over 25-year-olds within the next 6 months. So we need to know what the workflow should be for brokers to be as efficient as possible and have one workflow for every carrier that offers telematics. After-hour service, which was rated 4th, was put forward at the face-to-face meeting. And as you can see from the numbers here, it is a rather distant 5th. Kind of surprising to me, but I've been surprised many times. Now, these working groups that you see down the left-hand side all have their best practice workflow defined, and it is completely vetted. However, we have not yet been able to get a carrier and a vendor, or a BMS, to step forward to committing to build the technology to fit the workflow. The electronic document transfer working group, we know eDocs is live, but they had a very, very broad list of documents that need to be included with what is now coming down in eDocs, which is why this is not yet deemed to be complete. And I know that brokers on the call know this. There are carriers that do not yet offer policy billing or claims inquiry. And we believe that they are the very basics of real-time. So again, that's not totally deemed as complete. So because we were at this stage with these best practice workflows, that they're all done, we're waiting for a carrier or vendor to step forward, they have nowhere to go, we've created what we called the Launchpad, a place where the best practice workflows sit while we continue to look for a carrier and ask carriers and vendors to get these workflows on their schedule. We feel that perhaps some carriers don't realize how close they actually are in their current workflow to meeting the best practice workflow. So we have offered to do opportunity audits, which means we walk through a carrier and a vendor existing workflow and compare it step by step with the best practice workflow. We then produce a report to the vendor and the carrier documenting where they meet the best practice workflow, where they are deficient, and what it would take to get on side for those deficiencies, and even where they surpass the best practice workflow. We've actually modified a workflow based on an opportunity audit. To date, we've completed one opportunity audit for new business quote and bind. We are waiting confirmation to complete a second one with a different vendor and a different carrier on new business quote and bind, and we have one pending on the commercial lines property workflow. So vendors, carriers, brokers, if anybody out there wants us to do an opportunity audit on any of these workflows listed, it's simple. Email info@ORBiT Canada, and we would love to make it happen. You may recall a few moments ago I talked to you about this group we created called the Innovation Working Group. The members on this group are people that I would consider the gurus in our industry. They are people who are connected to the thinkers, movers, and shakers in our industry, or perhaps they actually are some of the thinkers, movers, and shakers of our industry. We have 2 brokers on this working group, the Innovation Working Group, so we need more broker thinkers, movers, and shakers on this working group. So we had a huge grocery list of areas that this working group felt needed research. So we put it out there. These are the top 3 that came back. No surprise, the first one is telematics. When you think about all the talk that's out there, all the emails you see coming into your inbox every day, it's no surprise it's here. Next was pre-fill. And pre-fill is you put a piece of information like a driver's license number, which gives you a whole bunch of other information that is pre-filled, so it saves keystrokes and clicks. So with pre-fill, what the Innovation Working Group is thinking that the new business quote and bind, people need to be brought into that to determine which carriers and vendors, or yes, carriers and vendors, sorry, are already offering pre-fill, and then we need to build a business case for more pre-fill. The last one here, 35% customer expectations. We think there might be some confusion about what was intended in this working group or this innovation thought process and what was actually grasped. It was intended to address sales effectiveness and forecasting for the brokerages, but we think the title was misleading. We believe perhaps that respondents thought more about digital client experience than sales effectiveness and forecasting. So the Innovation Working Group is going to tap into the Digital Client Experience Working Group to narrow down that research. At the real-time days in May, the 27th, 28th, 29th, we have allotted a lot more time on the agenda to dig deeper into the survey results, because we actually saw a disconnect between the priorities of the working groups, or the rating of the priorities of the working groups, and what people said the Innovation Working Group should focus on. So we need to have a longer discussion to make sure we get it right. So John, I will turn things back to you at this point.
Great. Thanks very much, Wendy.
You're
so
welcome.
now I'd like to ask Beth to tell us about her experience with the Electronic Document Transfer Working Group. Beth, over to you.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Good, okay. Thanks, John. I've been a team leader with ORBiT since its inception and involved with many of the different working groups. For the bulk of that time, I've been the team leader for Electronic Document Transfer, or EDT as we call it. There's been many different real-time initiatives developed over the years, and I've always been involved in supporting them. I guess I'm just one of those people who get excited about influencing change. As you know, these past initiatives have not been successful, and I really believe that ORBiT, an ORBiT type organization, is necessary to help keep awareness high and push our industry to do more. We used to hope that we could improve the sharing of information between brokers and third parties or carriers, etc. But now we're at the point where it's no longer a hope, it's an expectation. And so my success story that I'm excited about is EDT. And we started working on this group in 2010. We had a whopping 27 members, which is fantastic, 10 companies at least. Almost all of the vendor systems were represented, CSIO, and a lot of brokers. And through the process of hammering out a best practice, these individuals went back to their respective offices and helped get EDT budgeted and prioritized on their roadmaps for implementation. CSIO went back and ensured these standards were available and working, and they searched for a vendor and a carrier to test it, and they did, and it was successful. Right after that, many companies started to approach CSIO to get on board, starting with those carriers that were involved in our EDT group. And now here we are a few years later, we have what is known as eDocs. It's offered by most companies, and brokers are taking it up. I get really excited about these kinds of successes. For a working group, we have regular meetings, usually 3 to 4 weeks, every 3 to 4 weeks via a conference call. Most meetings are kept to an hour. Occasionally, groups might meet face-to-face, depending on the nature of what's being worked on. There's very little homework for a group member. A working group member's main job is to contribute during the meetings, especially brokers, to help mold that best practice around that ultimate ideal perfect workflow for a brokerage. As a bonus, I really enjoy networking with ORBiT members. It gives me an opportunity to create new relationships with people and companies that I might not have normally met outside of my regular circle. And it's a great way to pick up ideas for improving workflows in your own brokerage. So ORBiT is a broker-driven organization, so we feel strongly that a broker should be leading a working group. If you are at all interested in participating in any capacity, let us know. You can get in touch with us at info@orbitcanada.ca. So back to you, John.
Okay, thanks very much, Beth. So we have time for a couple of questions now, and Wendy, I have one for you.
Already? My goodness.
You mentioned that telematics was on your priority list there, and the question here is, what would ORBIT's telematics-related activities include?
Well, the Innovation Working Group, what they've first been charged with is, they've told us there's a lot of information out there already. So they are going to put together a fact sheet telling us, the various ways that telematics can be offered, at what different intervals that premiums could be adjusted and such. So the working group would take that information, synthesize it and then figure out, okay, from a broker desktop, what needs to happen for the workflow dealing with telematics to be most efficient. So it is a clear slate at this point, John. So we get to create the first actual workflow for telematics from a broker's desktop.
Okay, that's excellent. Beth, I have a question for you here. It says, I'd like to join a working group, but I don't have a lot of time available. Contribution.
You cut out a little bit. Don't have a lot of time available for contribution?
I'd like to join a working group, but I don't have a lot of time available. Can I still make a meaningful contribution?
Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely. Any contribution is welcome, especially from a broker side, because carriers and vendors love to hear from brokers. They really listen on these working groups. So any time, even if it's not every call, no one makes every call, but if you make, 1 out of 3, so appreciated, and it makes a difference.
And John, if I could just do an adjunct to that, because I'm on a couple of working groups as well. What's important is making the call and contributing during the call. So sometimes we have participants who are lurkers, so they take it all in and they learn a lot, which we love, but we need some of the information back. So we need brains to contribute, not just brains to make withdrawals from the calls.
Okay, so it sounds like there's lots of potential for contribution there.
Yep.
Okay, Wendy, while you're there, I have another question for you. You mentioned real-time days. So the question is, what types of things will I learn at real-time days that I can take back to the office with me?
Well, you're going to learn lots at real-time days to take back. So this year, we're doing it, actually, it's quite different than we've done in the past. We have 3 panels, one on telematics, and this is to give brokers information about what things that they need to know, and even underwriters actually, what they need to know about what's going to be happening with telematics, what's available in the industry today, how will it work. So just to get us at, all the basics for understanding telematics. Then we have digital client experience, panelists saying what they're doing, what's working. We've got a carrier who was offering a digital client experience. They've withdrawn from it, and we want to learn from some of the things that they've learned as to why they've withdrawn. And then we have one on e-signatures, which, as I said, is voice and digitized signatures. And that is, talking about some brokers who are already using e-signatures. What are the options available? How do you fit it into your workflows? What are carriers who are sanctioning verbal or audio or digital signatures? What are they doing around auditing so that we as brokers can be prepared? And then for show and tell this year, we're doing it differently. Normally we have a separate breakout room for each vendor, and you go to your vendor's breakout room and see what they're offering. This year we're all staying in the same room. And there are a couple of different reasons for this. First is that we think that all brokers and even underwriters and marketing reps and CEOs of carriers need to see what all the vendors are offering with all of the markets as far as real-time goes today. And so it's going to spark ideas in brokers' offices to do things differently, things that they can ask for from their vendor, from their carriers, and also may drive a little bit of competition, which is never bad for our industry. So lots to learn. Oh, wait, John, sorry, 2 more things. We have 2 keynote speakers this year. So I don't know about all the brokers on the call, but I know in brokerages where I've worked and where I'm in as my customers is that we have become very, we deal with our customers in a very transactional way. We've become administrators where we used to be salespeople, and we used to respond relationship-wise, not technically. But we have become so focused on administration, we've forgotten about the relationship with our customers. So Sean Mulcair, who was a hit last year as a keynote, he's going to talk to us about creating the client relationship again. So it's migrating from a transactional relationship to a relational relationship. And then we've got Alex Gallagher from Engage HR talking to us about the skill set that we need in our office to move to this digital world and to have a relational relationship. And if we don't have it, how we get those skills for our existing staff. And if we're looking at hiring, What skill sets do we look to hire for? Because perhaps we don't even have that skill set ourselves, and we don't know where things are going, so we don't know what to look for. So it is, honest to God, a jam-packed day.
It sounds like it's going to be an excellent event. Okay, super. That seems to be all the questions that we have, so I think we're down to our last couple of minutes here. So I think we'll draw to a close. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending today and for your questions. So the recording of today's session will be on our website by tomorrow morning. And if you'd like more information on ORBiT priorities or working groups, or in particular if you'd like to join a working group, please visit our website or send us an email at info@orbitcanada.ca. Or even better, join us at Real-Time Days in May, because we'd love to see you there. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And we'll look forward to holding more webinars in the future, and we hope you'll join us for those as well.